Person from your group can meet me back there and give me your last name so I can give you the right magneto.
Yeah. We're halfway there. It's Friday. See if it's around. What's your feature? So just set the viewer and then study you have this?
I'm sure I barely remember I This one is not having
Oh, super flathead. Flathead. That's all there is.
It's like 1 unit.
Really? You know, one of the major things that you do when you take your test is he wants to make sure that you can follow directions. Just to let you know.
It's like a dog put his scouts out, we put them out, you know.
For which one? Fire? No. That's why I'm looking like man.
Okay, is everybody sitting next to their partner? Yes? Okay. So if you weren't here earlier, you're going to take your magneto apart in lecture, and then in lab, you guys are basically going to go through your book, and as if you're doing an overhaul, you're going to evaluate your parts, you're going to test your capacitor, you're going to test your coil. All of that is explained in your book, and I hope that all you guys can use meters because we specifically set time aside so you can learn how to use the meters. And obviously I have meters back there if you need them. It's not a required tool for the program.
Okay.
You guys good?
We don't know what we're doing.
You don't know if you are? It's okay.
It's confusing.
Why is it confusing?
Well, it's like read the book, but watch you take it apart at the
No.
same time.
Okay, so I'm not telling you to read the book right now. I'm telling you how this class has been set up that has been better to do it, to take it apart as a class. And I knew that I would have some resistance. This has been the biggest resistance class I've had so far.
So just watch you take it apart. Don't worry about the book.
No, you're not going to watch me take it apart. You're going to take yours apart with me.
Oh,
That's
okay.
the whole reason your magneto is out. If you were just going to watch me, you would have your magnetos put away, and you guys would be doing it with, you guys would just be watching me, which I have done in the past, but the instructor that taught this class last semester assured me that it is better for you guys to hold the parts in your hand. while we're talking about this. If not, you guys let me know. I want feedback because I always have another. Next semester, I'll do it a different way. But I always encourage feedback to say, hey, it didn't work for me that way. I didn't like it. You should do it a different way. I'll consider it because I'm here for you guys. Okay? So, and I've already got feedback from this group that I don't think that they're going to like this. But
What? No,
No, not at all. I'm totally happy with this. We were just talking.
Who takes notes? Who takes it? Who reads the book?
you don't really need to take notes. You don't need to read the book. You guys, I gave you guys ample enough time in lab. So if you guys tell me 30 minutes after lab starts, I want to put it back together, that I know everything, I'm going to probably question that. I'm going to ask you, hey, do you know this? Do you know that? So I'm kind of trying to do this as a practical standpoint so you guys can visually see the parts before we go through electrically so you can see what I'm talking about. Because I'm talking about a capacitor. Does anybody know what a capacitor looks like unless you've taken this apart before?
Round.
It's round?
Cylindrical.
All of them?
All in-
No, not really.
So this way, as most people are mechanical, they hold a part in their hand, they can see what you're talking about. Okay? So that's the whole reason why we're trying this exercise. Like I said, if it doesn't work for this class, please let me know. And next semester, I want to help the next class around, and what didn't work for this one might work for another one. Also, before we get started, there was supposed to be a rag in everybody's box with their magneto. Those were provided for in there, so if they're not there, I have rags up here. Please, when this class is over with, please keep the rag with the magneto because this is actually not provided free for everybody. These actually, instructors actually bought these, so they stay with there. So when the next group takes them apart, they have a rag to put them on and put it back together. So I'm going to pass these around, and if yours does not have a rag, please take one. So if yours does not, just pass it back.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of them probably took the rag with them, which I probably would have too, I'm not going to lie.
Microfiber.
Yeah, I think they are from the auto store. I was actually going to buy a few if I didn't have enough for this class.
Do you have a sandwich bag?
Well, that's something. At least you already have a bag to put your parts in. Also, to remind you guys, when we take this apart, please keep your parts with that actual part. So when we take the capacitor off, make sure you know what screws go back with the capacitor. It'll be much easier when you guys put it back together. I will not be putting it back together as a class. You guys will be putting them back together as your own group. Everybody will be working at a different pace. So, does everybody have a rag? Yes? Okay. First thing about your magneto. It is a self-sustaining part. Electrically, it is self-sustaining. Doesn't need any outside source electrically. Okay? So first thing I want you guys to know. Second, you see these two little slots on the side of your guys' magnetos. Those are for timing on the engine. So it's slight adjustments. You will learn that when you go out and time it, or if you've already had recips, I'm sure you timed these in recips class. Is that correct? Okay. For you guys that have not, this is obviously your first class for power plant. No problem. You'll see these when you guys time it out there after you guys internally time the magnetos. Any questions? Any questions, Jude? Seem like you have a question.
I have no questions. I just want to see this thing pull apart.
Okay, so the first thing I want you guys to pull apart is this housing. There's 4 screws. When you guys pull it apart, please be careful because there is a wire attached to it.
Shall we commence?
Yeah.
No. I'm pretty sure she was starting. Okay.
What do you need to borrow?
You got a straight screwdriver?
Just the one I'm using.
You guys need a screwdriver?
No problem.
I'm just trying to make sure.
Is that a magnetic screwdriver? Do you have a regular one by any chance?
Yes.
Can you use it? Thank you. Trying to avoid magnets. I know that some of you guys might have been outside of class. I understand that your screwdriver might have a little bit in it, but I would like you guys to avoid using any magnetic screwdrivers.
Can you explain what that is?
Because you don't want the demagnetizing in there. You don't want it to happen.
Is that what we're?
It could happen. So we try to avoid it as much as possible.
Try to pay attention where that wire's supposed to go. Yeah, right.
Okay, did you guys have your capacitor in your housing?
Uh,
Or actually in your magneto?
I have no idea.
Can
This
you show
was,
me the inside of it?
yeah, this was all apart when we got it, so unless
That's probably, yeah.
this is just the feeler gauge and some other random stuff.
Okay, so for my students that actually have their cable in there, please feed it out gently and don't break it. So technically your capacitor would be like this, if you have one in there, but yours might be in your housing. Is yours actually in here? You don't even have a capacitor. Well, can you guys please make sure you mark that when we go into lab that you need one, because we will give you one.
Okay.
You need screws for the capacitors.
You need screws? Okay. Write down what part numbers you guys are missing. So keep note of that as we're taking this apart. So does everybody have that part so far?
Not yet, we took out the wrong screws.
That's all right.
So the white one goes to the far one, oh, there's the same block.
Remember, you cut the green wire first.
Cut the red wire. Don't cut the red wire.
You have a red one and a green one?
So this should have been plugged in, oh, it's just broken. So we need a new wire. So the white one came on the outside.
You guys are good? Okay, so I understand that not all of you guys have your capacitor in there. Is that correct? Some people are missing them all together. Is that correct too? Okay, so before we continue on, I want you guys to take a look inside your magneto, right here, after the housing. Some of you guys will have two screws right here, two screw holes. That is also for, some of you guys may have your capacitor in there for one model. The other model, that is set up for another set of breaker points that do the exact same thing an impulse coupling would do. Can you put under the camera, what you're pointing to?
Now we make it a dual, right?
No. So there's a couple different models in your book. There's a S20 and S200. The difference, one of the major differences is one of them has those retard points. Remember we talked about it for starting up the engine? So it's going to be this part right here. If you guys are looking in there, you'll see two screw holes right there.
No, we don't see that.
Okay.
We have the S2.
S200 or S20?
Yeah. We have points on either
S200?
side.
Okay. So some of your guys' is set up for an impulse coupling, and some of them are set up with those extra retard points. Okay, just two different kinds of models. Most people will have the ones like I'm just describing that have the two holes right here. Those are set up for the other breaker points. I think some of your magnetos have two sets of breaker points in them. Does anybody have two sets?
Yes.
Yeah, your guys' has that? Okay, so it's set up that way. And all of it does is it acts just like the impulse coupling. It retards the spark. So you have two sets of points in there you'll have to time when we get to that point. Okay?
So then the two sets of breaker points act as an impulse?
No, there's one that's the regular points, and then there's the one that acts as a retard point.
Okay.
Okay? And those are the ones that are set up as if it is like the impulse coupling, which recharge the spark. So for my students that have their capacitor inside their housing, which should look like this, you guys just find me the part number and I'll give you guys a replacement. I'm really sorry. They had a lot of. You guys can remove that and take it out because you guys are going to test your capacitor. Yes, correct.
That's what those screws were, obviously.
Yeah,
So you guys have the screws, just not the.
yeah, I believe these small screws would be for that.
Yeah, Four housing screws.
And I'm thinking this wire here is what's actually supposed to go to the capacitor.
I would assume so, but I didn't see a connector on it.
Well, it looks like when they put the housing together, they jammed it in there, so the wire might be jacked up too.
Could be.
Yeah.
Or no, maybe not.
Seems like there's a wire in there, but it doesn't seem to be connected to the like this. There's nothing there. Or is it coming in from behind?
No,
that's what
that,
it
that,
says.
that capacitor would connect to here. Yeah, I'm just not seeing that wire. I don't know what's this wire.
That's like, I think that's the wire that's running behind.
I can't really tell. Is that a wire?
Yeah, I think so. It is.
Okay. Well, it should have-
Hey, does everybody have that off?
You just gotta.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So the next part we're going to take apart is all you guys should have little black caps on both sides. What do you guys think those are for?
Black caps.
Just out of a guess.
That's your.
For timing, but why do I have them capped off then? Why don't I just have it exposed all the time? They're dust covers. Basically, they're preventing FOD from coming in, oil, those kind of things. So you guys are more than welcome to remove those. I only have one. You only have one?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you only have one. It doesn't affect how your magneto works, I promise.
It'll be fine.
I don't want you to feel like I'm gypping you.
Yeah, we didn't have a capacitor. A flux
You feel
capacitor.
No, but I had to.
I'm trying here, I'm trying. Exposes it? Yeah.
That's what I mean by exposed.
Yeah, you can see it there. And also, if you happen to have two caps, one of them's gonna have 4 little holes in it. What do you think that's for? Ventilation?
Yes.
Yes, ventilation.
Because it gets hot.
So he told me he didn't have 2 caps, so if you don't have 2 caps, I'm sorry about that. But if you do, one of them should have 4 holes in it. Okay, so everybody with me so far? Pretty easy? Yeah? Okay, so the next part we're going to take off is the points. The first thing I recommend doing is taking out the wire, being very gentle with it. They're easy to break. I heard a group over here that theirs is already broken. I'm sure they got it that way. Always? Okay, and then you can use the screw. Take the screws out. Don't worry about messing up with the points and where they're located. You're going to retime this when you put it back together. Okay?
have gone on here.
Is it? We'll take a look.
So it's normally crimped on here, just pull out. Yeah, so it's just like this.
Yeah.
That's gonna be something.
Yeah, it's inside.
So yeah, you got those screws. Just remember that you have one segment for every part and the other segment.
This one's for.
Are you sure? 'Cause that one says R on that side. Is R our clue? Somebody even wrote it for you, yeah. I would double check.
It was, yeah, the way it was hooked up though.
Backwards?
I guess, yeah. This point was connected to the retard.
Maybe they wrote it backwards. That's, sometimes it's not good to look what other people do. Double check.
How bad is that if you do it backwards?
It's not really because the points, it's just how they're timed. So the points look identical. It's whichever one you put where, just so that you know what side is which. So the points themselves aren't bad. Okay, so you guys are making sure to keep your screws with the right parts, right? Okay, and then if you guys have a rag, you can set them all out. I'm horrible because I don't have a little baggies to keep them separated. So you guys let me know when you guys have taken out your points. I understand that some people have 2 sets of points they need to take out versus 1. So far, so good? So you guys know what this part is?
Capacitor.
Capacitor, condenser, however you want to say it. This point, what is this? Here, I can do this. Breaker points.
Breaker point.
So the whole reason of taking this apart together is to get you familiar with what the parts are. Just like when we went out there and we said these are spark plugs, this is a harness, this is kind of the same thing.
So this is the left side? That's where the current breaks, the point at which the current breaks.
You guys all got that part? Okay, the next part is we're going to split this thing in half. So there's 5 screws holding them in. They're all the same length, or they should be all the same length. So you don't have to worry about which one went where. They all should be the same length.
What is that?
Okay, after you guys have all the screws out, please wait, and we're going to take it apart slowly because I also want you guys to be aware of that cable, or that wire. So when you guys pull your halves apart, please be aware of the wire and feed it through gently.
Yeah, it's actually probably not.
washer attached to the magnet.
A washer attached to your what?
Magnet.
I would hold on to it. Might belong somewhere else.
Huh. Don't have extra parts.
So does everybody have their split in half? Almost? If you're already to that point, you guys are more than welcome to take your magnet out because it's going to fall out either way, so it'll slide right out. So when you guys do it, make sure you come out this way because you got a seal on the other side. It's not going to come out this way. I can't attach to it. So let me know when you guys are all at that point. I'll wait for you guys. Oh, you're talking. I thought you were talking about this as the cam.
Contacts. Open. Break the circuit.
And then all you guys have to do is push the magnet out, rotor, whatever you want to call it. That thing right there, it's going to come towards you. There's a seal on the other side. Okay, does everybody have theirs out? Yes? Okay, so first thing I want you guys to notice is there's ball bearings on both sides.
It's all over.
You guys will be re-lubing those when you put it back together. There is a call out in the book on what you're supposed to use. Yes, we do have that grease here, believe it or not. Not a shocker. What? Yeah, believe it or not. Do you believe it? No. We'll find out when that happens. Also, I want you guys to notice that this thing is round and it's got two pole shoes, a north and a south, right?
Yes.
Okay, when they first made these, this wasn't round. It was flat on both sides. It actually caused it to lock up, and that's why they went to a rounder surface, because these shoes are steeled on aluminum part. Okay? Also, I want you guys to notice is here's the cam. This is what opens and closes your points. You guys see that? We're not going to take it apart. We're not going to take the screw out and have to pull all this apart. We don't need to go that far with this. But you guys notice right here, you know how this isn't completely rounded? Yeah? So when you guys had your points in there, when you rotated it, it would open and close the points. So when it was on the flatter surface, points would be open. When you rotate it, it closes it. Okay? Okay, so we're going to set this aside. When you guys are disassembling this out in the field, it doesn't matter which half you choose to take apart first. I'm just going to pick the side with the coil first. So, right here. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this coil out. There's two screws at the bottom there. Please be careful. You got little tabs in there.
Yeah. I'm saying cabs and screws with that one.
They are identical. Okay, does everybody have theirs out? Yeah? So you notice you got two wires, a long one and a short one? The short one is to ground. The other one is to the, I got it backwards, primary. So you have two coils and you have your primary and secondary. You guys will learn what each one does, obviously through the book, and we're going to go through it electrically. But basically, you see these little tabs in here? Remember how I told you guys to make sure you don't lose these? When you look inside this tab, you actually have embedded shoes inside. So if you guys can see that, I'll show you under the mirror. You see that? Okay, these tabs are what connect to that connect to the rotor. Okay, so they connect the coil through there. They don't actually touch this extension. These shoes extensions don't actually touch the rotor when it's spinning, but they get pretty darn close. Okay? So I just want you guys to take aware of that. Also, on the other side, you guys will notice that there's a seal, right? There should be a seal there, yes. Okay. There a lip and a seal. It's a lip seal. Okay, to prevent oil from coming in from the engine. You don't have one of those either. You guys having fun? You guys are dying over here, aren't you? There should be one there.
It's in backwards. Somebody put it in backwards. There, it's in backwards.
There's a lot of people that don't have them.
See the face of it is in.
I will see if I can get Mark to order more of those. Just make sure you write that down in your discrepancies so we're aware of that. But there should be one there to prevent oil from coming into the magneto.
See how hers is flush on the top? It's just upside down.
Your guys' was put in backwards?
Put it back.
That's weird because we don't usually tell students to take that out.
What's backwards?
Huh?
What's backwards?
Well, it's a lip seal, so if the lip's on the opposite side, and it's not flush,
Okay.
doesn't sit into the part very
Can I
well.
see the other side of that?
Yeah.
That's the top, so it should be flush this way.
And I can pass this around. I'm going to leave mine disassembled through the whole course of you guys putting yours back together. So if you want to come take a look at mine, if you're missing a piece, and
It's
so
just, it
forth.
just looks different than her picture, you know what I'm saying, her picture is flush.
So the
Yeah,
whole
yours is right, hers is
backwards.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible.
At least,
That's what I. We're gonna vote later.
but I've been wrong before.
Yeah?
Once or twice.
Once or twice. Also, I want you guys to take note when you're looking at your coil, this brass tab right here. We're going to take the other half apart and I'm going to kind of relate those two pieces together. It actually rubs onto this carbon piece, which goes through a spring, goes through the distributor block out to the different parts, or different cylinders through the harness. Okay? So, everybody this far with me? You guys kind of getting this a little bit? Okay, so that's all that's really in this half is pretty much the coil. It's actually the easier part, I think, to take apart. The biggest part I want you guys to remember is the shoe extensions here. So when they rub in here, you put your rotor back in there, rotate it. There's north and south pole. When you have more poles, you could have 2 north, 2 south. Those are for bigger engines, more cylinders, more spark plugs, and so forth. Okay? I think this rag is just not big enough for this. So I want you guys to set that part aside. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the distributor block half. The first thing we're going to take apart is this carbon piece. Please be careful because this piece breaks all the time. There's a spring attached to it. So when you guys do it, if you rotate it clockwise, the spring should come with it. Mine is already broken, so I might not get my spring to come out with it, which I didn't. And that's where your pick comes into play. But if you guys rotate it clockwise, it might come out with it.
Oh, is it just the carpet?
What's the brush?
So I'm gonna feed mine out. My piece is really in there. Of course it is. So everybody got that piece out? Yeah? Do you guys have a carbon piece at least?
Yes, we
Do you
did.
have a spring?
Yes.
Okay, that spring is very important. Without it, this thing will not work. Okay, so you guys notice you have a distributor gear in here?
Yes.
Yeah, and you have you have timing marks. There's actually indications you have a CCW and a CW. Your book will tell you what that is, but if you use some common sense, you might notice that that's clockwise and counterclockwise. Okay? So the next part is, I know that everybody doesn't have snap ring pliers, so I'm going to pass out a couple. And you guys are going to take this snap ring off the back of there.
No.
Okay, so I'm going to start over here. When you guys are done, please hand it to the next group. I'm going to take mine off and then give mine away. Go ahead and make these work or else they're Nope, these are too big. I'll need to borrow somebody's before I pass it on.
Except for my computer.
Where in the fuck did that just go?
Did you lose it?
Yeah, it went flying. Did you find?
Oh my goodness. Are you okay? Everything? No loss? No loss of limb? Holy cow. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Good shot.
Yeah.
Man,
Went right into the box.
Thank you.
Oh, really? Nice.
Alright.
You can do that again. $1 million shot.
Yeah. You can pop it off and then, you know, when we picked it up, it split out quick.
maybe this is where the safety glasses would come in handy.
I don't think it would have put an eye out.
Yeah.
But
Get stuck in there.
Alright, I'm gonna have to trade somebody. Can we see those snapping pliers? Can I see this one? Oh, so you're gonna get this one out. Some of you guys' snap rings are gonna be worn. You can use those. Sorry, they told me they had snap ring pliers here, but I didn't see any. And these is my set from
Super
home.
smooth.
Jeez, I'm having issues today. This is like the hardest part for me.
Smells like they're just to see.
Yeah.
Boundary. Yeah.
You could be
That
missing
brings
some.
up shit, I gotta give it back to her
Yeah, this thing is killing me.
I'm no pro here, but I don't think the ball bearing is missing.
No?
That's what's keeping it there. Gotta put back in there. I didn't do it, okay? Gates and wondered, it wasn't me. Sorry, like that.
Exploded.
Yeah. There we go.
Can I get the girls?
There you go. Just pass those on.
Holy.
Mine's pretty beat up. So for my students that have theirs apart already, you guys will notice that there's a washer and a piece of felt in there. Yeah? Okay. You guys can actually take out the washer and the pieces of felt. Where's the felt?
Yeah, where's the?
You don't have felt either?
No felt.
Yeah, there is.
No, we have none.
Oh, we have felt?
Yeah, that's
Oh, I got
It just looks
that.
like this.
This guy right here?
Yeah, that's
So you should have a washer, a snap ring, and 2 pieces of felt on each side.
Do you need a pig to get that?
Yes, you do.
Figured that. I gotta stick my screwdriver. That's how.
So I'll wait for everybody to get theirs off. I'm sorry I don't have more snap ring pliers.
Gotta sit over here.
It's the proper technique.
There really isn't one. You just try to be as gentle as you can. And you just take it out like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll stab it, but it's not going to harm it.
we could totally do something like that. Need one of those grabbers for the.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. I think it's just one.
Okay.
And this piece of felt, all it's here for on both sides is to lubricate the bearing. Or sorry, the bushing, not the bearings, the bushings. So you guys have one in there.
What kind of lubricant?
It's written in your book what it is. We actually have that as well. Sorry, I don't have those parts memorized, but
Rotate correctly.
I'll wait for everybody to get that far and then we'll continue on. Is everybody doing okay? It feels really hot in here, doesn't it?
Perfect. Over here, I don't even remember breeze. Really nice.
Yes, you can take the felt out off both sides. You guys will lubricate it when you put it back in. Yeah. I'm standing at this light.
So we just got 40 minutes.
Does it distribute what?
Has everybody got their snap ring out?
We're having trouble with, there's supposed to be a second snack inside here.
No, it's gonna be hard because you guys probably don't have a pick and you're trying to get out with a screwdriver, I'm gonna guess. That's probably why it's not coming out. There you go. Okay. So we're gonna recap a little bit how this works. So, you guys remember your coil?
Yes.
Okay. So remember your breaker points are opening and closing. When they close, they go through the primary coil, which goes through this cord. So when you're going, these are directly connected to your points. So remember you guys pulled it off of your points, right? So when it closes, it's the primary side, it's going to go through here. Once it collapses, it goes across the secondary coil, which comes out this brass tab right here. There's 20,000 volts or more coming out of this brass tab. Okay? That brass tab is connected to that little piece of carbon I told you guys that was connected into here. The brush. Okay? That's connected to the spring that comes out here. There's nowhere else for this to go but except out this finger, right? So we're that far in the process. So when the points close, goes through the primary wire into the coil, the primary coil. When that collapses, it'll come out through the secondary, which is this brass tab that's connected to the gear through the spring that comes out through this tab. Okay, we're that far? We'll explain this a little bit more detailed next week, but so you guys kind of get the flow of how this is working.
So this tab is gonna make it shooting that.
Yeah, right, okay.
It's gonna go.
Yeah.
As soon as you get the wires
Okay.
are connected to as part of the
Yeah, you start.
So we are on the part with the distributor block, which has 3 screws in it. These screws are all the same length as well. So if you guys want to, you guys can take that out.
I have one question. I don't understand what you mean by the term collapse. Magnetic field.
The magnetic field collapses and then it goes across the secondary coil. Which next week when we explain it electrically, I'll be able to show you electrically how that works. Just know that that's what it does. For now, that's
Primary and secondary.
primary and secondary are both in there.
Remember how we were saying DC electrical? Remember how we were talking about magnetic field can be induced when current flows in a wire next to it. When that current stops suddenly, that field collapses. That affects the wire next to it. That's basically what's happening inside the coil. Current flows through here, okay? They charge it, so to speak. So, okay, so now you have current flowing through here, and it's just telling you which field built that. When the points are big, current stops flowing. Collapse. That's where that collapse. It reduces voltage in the secondary.
So your distributor block might not come out very nicely. I have a piece of wood that I'll pass around. Please do not beat on the block or on the distributor block because it is plastic. You will break it. Some of them should push out, but if you can't get it to push out, I'm passing a block around that you can use to pop it out. It's real easy. Yes. It can only come out one way because if you notice it's got a flange right here, it won't go anywhere. You'll just keep breaking it. Okay?
When your board's like, you know, it takes all that energy to go off the ground.
You make it sound like I know this experience.
They're relatable enough.
When you guys get the block, it'll be really
You gotta go in, it just can't, it's just with my rotor, you know, there's always, but when the current goes in there, it goes, and then and then when it collapses.
Actually, really good.
Say it again.
Yeah, one block, how you do
Worst
the
falls,
block?
the energy has to be somewhere, which creates the voltage.
Pixelate my. This for us. The other resistance.
Good, it's got a snug fit. It's got a snug fit.
Secondary resistance. She told us the lab is what we have to do now, we use the lab to check, like we gotta check the capacitor, make sure all the stuff's specs. We gotta check the stuff before we take it back. Like now or ours, like we each drove form, so we got current, either we get a new one or we.
You guys are gonna need a new one because your capacitor is not working or your cable's broken. It's not gonna fire. It's got a fire. So
You gotta leave it, spins it up.
Huh? Yeah, we have a tester right outside the door. It has to work. That's the first thing it's gonna do when you do your checkout is it's gonna work.
Then how come this one was put together with a broken thing?
Because probably they put it back in there when they changed it because they took a capacitor from somebody else's magneto to get theirs to fire. Well, they happen to have to order more of them because if 3 people's breaks, you know, or when I did this class, we had 5, and I replaced all the 5, and then next semester, more break. They've been using these things for a very long time. Yes.
It's not so much that it has to go somewhere.
That just.
That's kind of like so when you guys are doing an actual overhaul. So, did everybody hear his question?
No.
Okay, so he asked in disassembly, why does they always tell you to change out the screws?
Well, this thing says, you know, in the book it says you have to replace these things with new if you open it up for any reason, whether you're inspecting or overhauling or replacing parts. They say you have to replace the bearings, all the screws, the E-clip or the retaining clip, and then the data plate. I don't understand.
Okay, so for our purposes, if it's good, you put it back in, right?
Right.
Okay, for most purposes, you do that. They do that just to avoid any stripping, any parts being bad, so they know brand new parts are in there and it's going to work efficiently. So you could say the bearing's good, but he could say it's bad. That way, they just make you change them all together. Now, when you run your own shop and you want to do that risk, that's your choice.
You signed it off.
But you sign it off. Most people still send their magnetos out to be overhauled. Believe it or not, they still do that. You as a mechanic can do it, but a lot of shops send them out to an actual specialty place that does them, just like your carburetors and so forth. But that's the reason why they do that, for those purposes. Because when you say you sign it off according to this manual, they're saying that this is good. Okay? Did everybody get their distributor block out? No. Okay, who has a piece of wood and the hammer so these guys can get theirs out? Oh, do I have it?
It was right here.
You took it
Oh, I took it. I thought you guys were done. Sorry. Do you guys still need to get yours out?
No, we're
You
good.
guys got yours? Hey, anybody else besides this group? You guys need yours too? Okay. Yours broke? Why did you break it? Were you gentle? Break it.
You know how much those cost?
You're gentle. I'll take a look at it. We'll see if we need to replace it to get it to work. Leave it to one group to break it with using their items. Always happens.
If things didn't break, we wouldn't have time.
That's right, but they break all the time because of pilots anyway, so they seem to keep me employed. Okay, so everybody's got their block out, correct? Yes? Okay, you see these 4 different little tabs in here? Yeah? What do you think those are for?
That's what transmits the spark into the wire.
Say that a little bit louder?
That's what transmits the spark into the wire.
Correct. So you have 4 different points, so I'm going to assume we have a 4-cylinder, right? Right. You'd assume so. So remember when we talked just a few minutes ago about the electricity coming through this finger? That's what slides into here. It rotates around. So when it hits one, it has to be almost directly onto the tab inside for it to fire into that spark plug. Okay? So if it's not connecting any of those, it's not doing anything. So it's going to jump that gap into there. Okay? And then on the other side, harness goes on here and it distributes out to the spark plugs. Okay? So everybody kind of get that?
Yes.
So, and this is as far as I want you guys to disassemble your magneto. So I don't want you guys to take the rotor part. I don't need you to take the cam off. None of that. This part can stay just like it is. But I want you guys to be aware of these ball bearings. And you want to make sure when you grease these back, putting it back together, you want to make sure these are squished in there tight because your two halves will not go back on together properly. If you have to force it on, there's something wrong. Whether it's you got the wire stuck in where it shouldn't be, or these bearings need to be compressed tighter to fit in there. And I also want you guys to be aware that you guys have got a race in here, see? So where the oil seal is, that some people have, some people don't have. This is also gets grease on it as well when you guys put it back together. So it rides right on the cam here. So both sides.
Oh, yeah, it does move.
What moves?
Race.
Yeah, it shouldn't. Shouldn't move, but it is. And those parts at overhaul get replaced. We're not going to replace them for our purposes, but they can get replaced. They're just like the bearings in landing gear and wheels, wheel bearings.
Funnily enough, it just says bearings, it doesn't say races.
Oh, well, replace the bearings. Actually, that's not a surprise, actually.
Really?
Bearings, usually, if any one of the parts is going to be bad, it's going to be the bearings or it's going to be both. Usually the race isn't bad unless the bearings are bad. Most of the time, rule of thumb. Okay? So I understand a little. This is a little bit overwhelming. But like I said, we're going to go through this electrically next week. And like I said, you have your partners. Some of these guys have been through most all the programs. Some of them have not. But our basis is it goes through the points, down through the wire, collapses, secondary takes over where this tab is, and your guys' little carbon brush, mine's right here, with the spring, goes down through here into the finger, which shoots out of the distributor block that goes to the spark plugs. That is the basic, simple way this works, okay? There's a lot more technical on how the secondary, how the primary collapses and the secondary takes over, okay? But basically how this works is exactly what I just told you. When you guys are reassembling this, you guys will reset your points so they open and close when they're supposed to. We have kits for your E-gap. We'll discuss E-gap probably next week or the week after. Is everybody kind of okay with that? Did that happen? Is that okay that we broke it apart? Or you guys felt like you guys wanted to do it on your own? So feedback is great. So if you guys think, hey, it would work better next time, it would help me, let me know. I'm always up to new ideas. So for the remainder of the class, we're going to go to lunch here in about 30 minutes. But you guys can start on going through the manual and basically overhauling this, saying which parts are good, which ones are not, what you're missing, what's broken. If you have a capacitor that needs replaced, come see me. Give me the part number. We'll get a new one.
So we're also missing.
Okay? And then in 30 minutes, I'm going to call lunch. You guys can have a half-hour lunch. You guys can go back to this. Okay?
Not that one.
So
That, yeah.
That's
There should be a rubber seal here.
I mean, it says switch right there, but
Oh,
the switch is what grounds the contact.